Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice Podcast, episode 225. I'm the host, Kim Newlove. We are on episode 6 of 15 in my Pharmacist Authors Summer Series. My guest today is Dr. Tony Guerra. We'll be talking about his Pharmacist Residency and Career Series. That's an 8-book series. And stay tuned until the very end of the episode to hear Tony narrating a sample from book 1 in the series. Tony is a pharmacist, college professor, podcaster, and author with more than 30 books in 4 major categories. Tony and his wife Mindy live in Ankeny, Iowa, with their triplet daughters Brielle, Rianne, and Teagan. Check out the show notes on thepharmacistvoice.com to find links to Tony's books, his podcasts, he has at least 2 right now, his online courses, our June 2022 interview for the Pharmacist Dad series on this podcast, and more. If you're new to the Pharmacist Voice podcast, welcome. Again, I'm Kim Newlove, the host. I'm a pharmacist by training, but I'm not in clinical practice anymore. I am a voice actor and a podcast host. I graduated from the University of Toledo College of Pharmacy with my BS Pharm in 2001. Among other things, I narrate audiobooks for pharmacists. If you have a project in mind, whether it's an audiobook, a medical narration project, or something podcast related, contact me through my website, thepharmacistvoice.com. Without further ado, here's my interview with Dr. Tony Guerra. Hi, Tony. Welcome to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's good to have you here to talk about your series of books called Pharmacist Residency and Career Series. This is a great topic.
Yeah, no, I think as pharmacists are kind of moving toward graduation, especially we're a couple of months here. Although you said this comes out in June, so they'll have just graduated. And some of them may still have questions about where they want to be, and then others are going to have questions about where they are and if that's somewhere they can sustain. So it kind of covers the gamut. But we can definitely talk about all the books, and then we'll talk about one specifically, maybe that was done by a voice actor.
All right, sounds good. Now, a lot of the other pharmacists that are in this series have only written one book, and we're focusing on one book. But with you, there are 8 books in this series.
Yeah.
So congrats on the series, first of all.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. And I know that broadly the topic is pharmacist residencies. But is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
I wrote one called Unicorn Jobs, and you have a unicorn job. So unicorn jobs are those jobs that are unique. You can't really get hired for them often. You have to kind of make them because they give you all the flexibility that you want. But as any entrepreneur knows, those are people that are working 80 hours so they don't have to work a 40-hour week. So that's the kind of thing. But again, every book I've written has solved a problem. Most of the time it's my own problem, but sometimes it's for other people. And again, I want to be somebody that helps people find the solutions they need.
You are the pharmacist residency guru right now. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. To be honest, my job where I actually help people one-on-one is in writing. And there's a number of reasons why it's a little bit difficult for students to create certain writing things at the end of pharmacy school. One, they probably took Comp 1 and Comp 2, and if they're in the 3-year program, that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and then if they were in a 4-year program, maybe even smaller, 6 years ago, or even longer. And so writing about yourself in a single page with so much on the line, a lot of times they want help with that. And that was kind of the first book, kind of explaining the letter of intent, what it really is supposed to be. I don't really help people with CVs as much. I think that the schools do a good job of that. But again, really, it's what you're doing as a podcaster, which is telling your story and then getting other people to tell theirs. And it's actually very hard for pharmacists to talk about themselves and to, do that humble brag. So again, I think that, explaining the process to them is really important. It's kind of like buying a house. You don't do it a lot, but when you do it, there's a big impact if you do it wrong. So I want to make sure that they do well.
I like how your heart's in it. I know that you talk a lot about this on your podcast too, right? The topic of pharmacist residencies.
Yeah, 540 episodes so far. So it's just absolutely. I actually am going to like maybe once every 3 weeks or once a month now, just because I've already kind of said everything you can say about it, and I'm hoping that they actually won't need me too much anymore. As this year, we are at 74% after match day, which was Wednesday, and then we will find out in a month, or actually a little less than that. Um, what the actual match rate was, but we're going to see soon where there will be a residency for every single graduate as the enrollment declines and as interest in residency has gone down significantly. So I'm excited that people that really want to do it are going to have that chance and not be shut out.
Well, like you said, every time you write a book, it solves a problem.
Right.
And it sounds like you already talked about the writing piece of it, but why else did you write this 8-part series?
I think that each piece of it was really somebody that was struggling with something. So some people struggle with interviews, and now that you've done dozens and dozens of interviews, you feel very comfortable. But there are some people on the other end that really don't feel comfortable, especially under the pressure of this is someplace I really want to be. This is something I really want to do. So I worked with Brandon Dyson on 100 interview questions, answers, and rationales. Worked with Mike Lenz on the unicorn jobs. I did the letter of intent one. I've worked with a couple students who were interested in residency, and one graduated debt free. So it's like that's kind of a cool story. So it's kind of a mix of any kind a problem comes up, then try to solve it with a book. And I think one more was where this whole virtual interview is just so much different than flying out there, getting to meet the people. It's a very different thing to do. So yeah, just again trying to keep solving problems.
Nice. The world needs more problem solvers.
That's true.
Yes. Now, how did you become an authority on this topic?
Well, really, the big thing that I help people with is the letter of intent. So I'm an English major, and then I was going for a PhD in English and computers. It's called rhetoric and professional communication. I ended up getting a master's because they changed all the classes to 3 to 6, and anybody who's a parent knows that 3 to 6 is a special time for parents to pick up their kids, take them to their stuff, pick them up from their stuff. And it would be very tough for me to be a good partner and spending 3 days a week, weekdays, from 3 to 6 in a classroom. So ended up finishing up with an online master's. But my expertise is really in writing and helping people tell their story, not just because of the podcasting I've done, but because of all the writing I've done. And I also taught Comp 1 and Comp 2 for 2 years. And to write a letter of intent is really a Comp 2 challenge, which is logos, pathos, ethos. I'm sure you've heard the words and just like, what? But being able to show that you, one, have the passion for it, two, that you are have the credentials and basically you've done the work, and then third, that it really makes sense that you guys are a match. And I think students could do it if given enough time. But every pharmacy school is very different in how they handle residencies, and some schools do a great job, and others don't. And I'm just there to help them if they do need that help. But again, it really kind of comes down to me being more of a writing expert than a residency expert. I'm just helping them get in. After that, it's their 60-hour weeks.
Yeah, and they need to live up to whatever they wrote, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. But I think that the other thing that when you're doing a good job telling your story and understanding who you are is that you have 4,000. Well, actually, it's more than that now, but a little over 4,000 options. And so it's unlike pharmacy school where you have 125 options, and the average pharmacy student applies to between 2 and 3 schools, whereas you have 4,000 options, and the average person applying for residency applies to between 11 and 12 residencies. So it's very possible to apply to the wrong place and get rejected and think that you don't deserve a residency when it's quite the opposite. It's just you just applied to the wrong place because you didn't take the time to really reflect on what the values were, and you find out that, you didn't match because your values and the institution's values didn't really match. But if you do a good job, I had one student got 11 out of 14 interviews. I've had 7 for 7. So I've had people I've worked with, when they really take the time, it becomes a lot easier to see your path forward. And I think you've done this quite a bit, where you have to kind of look at your own life and the challenges in your life. And that's how you kind of decided where your entrepreneurial ship was going to go. So I think a cover letter seems like a nuisance, and it's just this thing that goes on top of a CV. But I think it's the other way around. I think if you get the cover letter right, then you've really understand yourself and where you should be going.
That's deep. I like it. Tony, you have a very specific audience for this book series.
Yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't really know much about pharmacy residencies because they're an early student, or maybe they're an allied health professional who stumbled upon this podcast, can you explain a little bit about who exactly the audience for this book series is?
Yeah, so when you're talking about residency, you're talking about someone who's interested likely in working in a hospital. And yes, there are community residencies, there are managed care residencies, there are residencies where you work in a hospital and you're looking to become an administrator. But when you talk about the audience, it's really that person who's going into their just before their final year. So that's P2 for those in 3-year programs, P3 for those in 4-year programs. And you're going to end up with this, getting a lot of advice about how to get a residency and where you should apply. And what happens is that you learn a lot about places that are, I don't want to call it popular. It's not as much popular, but well known. And the likelihood of you making it to one of those very competitive, what are called academic medical centers, is somewhat, it's very challenging to get one of those. And there are 4,000 out there, and so it's just kind of like podcasts, where it's really, if you look at the podcasts I listen to, they are very, very much something that I am very interested in. And I don't necessarily listen to some of the huge podcasts that are out there. And it's the same thing with residency. You really want to go for those podcasts or those residencies that really fit you well. And that actually takes a bit of digging. A lot of times you're going to hear about the big schools, and certainly the schools that your school is attached to, and certainly half of all residents tend to match in their own state, if they're not a tiny state like Rhode Island or something like that. And so when you're talking about audience, it's really those who are looking to really just match better, to find satisfaction in what's going to be a very difficult year or two. And I know that those going into the workforce may not have had to deal with this, but honestly, the person who is your immediate supervisor is really going to make or break your job, your residency, your fellowship, anywhere where you're working. It's the person right above you. So understanding that we're going to kind of take a move away from, or try to take a move away from, the place that you're going to go, and it is a place, I get that, to the people you're going to go. So I would 100 times out of 100 go for a good residency program director over quotation fingers elite residency program. The person that you're working for, the person that has your best interests in mind, are going to be so much more important than the place that you're going to go. So you can't really figure out who that person is if you don't know yourself that well. And if you kind of come into this whole thing presenting as, okay, well, I did these appies, and then I'm going to match up with these residency, rotations, that's going to be a good fit. That's going to be a good match. And really what you want is, I'm this kind of person. This is how I work well. This is how I take feedback well. These are the things that really motivate me. And so this is the type of person that I would want as a boss or a residency program director. So it's almost better to look back on the professor you liked the best, and see kind of what teaching style worked in that way, and try to find the person or program director that's going to be like that. And that's very hard to do, because if you even go to ASHP, you're going to see kind of like the residents are in front, then the second year residents are a little behind them, and then the RPDs in the back, kind of only to answer questions that the residents couldn't. And the one person that's most valuable to meet, not because you want to impress them, but because you want to get to know about them, is the RPD and the environment and culture that they create. So when you're talking about creating a culture, finding a place that really fits you, it comes down to getting to know yourself and getting to know the people that you're going to go see. And I'm excited that it's becoming easier to get a residency, so that it's going to be a lot more of, that FaceTime with that person. But again, just kind of the whole book series is really to articulate who you are and to kind of figure out who they are as people rather than as a place.
Great answer. Tony, what's an RPD?
Residency program director.
I figured, but I wanted to make sure to clarify in case there's anybody listening who doesn't know what that is.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, I went crazy with the acronyms there. Yeah, that can happen.
That's all right. Alphabet soup's my favorite meal.
Well, you do a lot of good pronunciations. I know it gets
thanks.
really tough. So
thanks. It can get tough. Yeah, but I try to break it down and make it a little easier. And I know you do that too.
yeah,
We share that love of drug name pronunciations.
Well, English major, yeah. Then they said I wouldn't amount to anything.
Hey, my mom is a retired English teacher.
Okay.
I have a lot of respect for people who are English teachers.
Yeah, I could do it for a little while.
Yeah, she worked as an English teacher, had a family, then came back. So she kind of had a break, and therefore it wasn't as overwhelming. I think a lot of people that go 30 straight through, without a break, that's tough.
That is impressive.
Tony, you have a very specific audience. They are pharmacy students. So I've got to ask, when is the best time for them to read this series?
I think that once you become a P2, you've kind of gotten past that first year. I think being a P2 is a place where you know enough about yourself, you know enough about what you're starting to get excited about. So I think second year pharmacy school would probably be the place to do that.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right, listeners, you have homework. Pharmacy student listeners, you have homework. All right, Tony, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Now, when people read these books, there are 8 of them. There's quite a few. What's the number one thing you want them to do with the information?
I want them to know more about themselves. I want them to better understand. I want them to better understand if a residency is even something they should do. Because when you talk about something like this, it really comes down to. So let's kind of back up with the big change that has happened in just the last couple of years. So in the last couple of years, residency, the desire for residency has gone down significantly. And so the question is, why did this happen? And there's a number of different kind of views on that. But I think that because it became so expensive to go to pharmacy school, I don't know how much you paid, but I paid $4,000 a year in tuition. And that was double what it would have been if I'd gone just the year before and gotten a bachelor's. So I paid $16,000 in total for my tuition. And so making mistakes wasn't really such a big deal. Now with the average, and it's going down, the average student loan debt was 178. Now I think it's actually in the high 160s as economic pressure forces schools to lower tuition. Now that there's just much less room for mistakes, and there's much less room to go take a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 job when your family has been sitting there for 6 years or 5 years like, hey, are you going to get a job one of these days and, kind of help out? And there are more, kind of married pharmacists and those types of things. So I guess when it comes down to it, you start with the letter of intent, which is what I put that one as the first book. because I think you really want to get to know yourself. Then you'll get, maybe you'll get an interview and you want to know what to do. So that was the residency interview help. And then the 100-strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales, and the phone interview tips for when you actually get to it. If you're in phase 2, which is you maybe you got an interview, but you didn't match. And this year there are over 700 PGY1 positions, almost 1,000 PGY1 plus PGY2 positions in phase 2. For a couple of reasons. The number of students applying went down, but also interest in residency has gone down. The number of residencies has continued to go up. So this is the first year where you have a really good, about a 50-50 chance of getting that residency, even in the second phase. So that's a great thing. And then when it comes down to it, there's an expectation that the residency is the end of the road and that clinical job is this great thing. But then you start reading like, oh my gosh, why are all these people burnt out in clinical? This was supposed to be the job. I didn't go to community. I did my residency. I got my clinical job. Why am I unhappy? And so you find that maybe the job that you got when you graduated worked when you graduated. But life, for example, with me, sends you 3 children at once, because I now have triplet 11-year-olds. And to be a present parent, doing a high intensity clinical job or even a community position is fundamentally incompatible with me being a present parent to those kids. There's just no way I can coach and do all those things if I'm working nights and weekends all the time. And so that was the finding the unicorn jobs, where there were other people like me that have these challenges. And then I met a physician who was like, we did this book for the residency match in medicine. Well, could we do one for pharmacy? I was like, yeah, that'd be kind of an interesting, parallel, where medical students, it's a lot harder to get into medical school, but a lot easier to get a residency because there's so many of them allowed to be in each residency. There's multiple doctors allowed in each. Whereas pharmacy, it's easy to get into pharmacy school, but it was harder to get into residency, now getting easier. Then I met a couple of students, and one of the students, she went and applied for an AmCare residency. And I was like, wow, this kind of journey we've had together really should be out there. And she, not only got the AmCare residence she wanted, she went 7 for 7 with her interviews. And then now she's in the clinical position she wanted in the place that she wanted. So it's just been a fun journey, kind of putting all these together, getting to meet other people. But really, when it came down to it, getting to the point where you have helped the student and the student is helping others, that I feel is a really special thing. I was just listening to How I Built This, Wisdom from the Top. And the CEO was saying the most valuable thing you can do in leadership is to make sure that the person who succeeds you is in a good position. And so when I see a student that has been able to put together a book, has been able to help other people with the residency, then I feel like it's really fulfilling. So it kind of came full circle. So I don't know that there'll be more residency books after this, because I've kind of gone through the whole journey.
Well, congratulations on finishing 8. That's a heck of an accomplishment. I'm sure you've got more books that you can write. But I must say, I got to compliment you here. 7 out of the 8 books in this series have audiobooks. Congratulations.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm an audiobook whale. I have over 700 Audible books in my Audible. So I can't
Wow.
read. I get car sick. So can't read in the car.
I love audiobooks too.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir, sir.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, but I just want to compliment you, because I always encourage pharmacists to make the audiobook. If you're going to write a book, please make the audiobook so I can listen to it. It's hard for me to sit down and read a book. I've got too many responsibilities that require me to be, using my hands.
There are many books that I never would have read if it wasn't in audio. And I have to agree with you.
Yep. And you reach a broader audience, just straight up. You reach a broader audience.
Yep.
Absolutely. You reach those people that only listen to the audiobooks, because some people, they just don't do print.
No.
Yep.
No.
All right, Tony. Well, where can my audience find your books and audiobooks?
Oh, just put in my name, Tony, and then Guerra, either in Audible or Amazon. I have over 30 books. A couple have been with, national publishers. Most of the stuff that's in audiobook are the things that I'm just trying to solve a problem for a very kind of niche audience, generally pharmacists, but um, Amazon and Audible are probably the best places to go.
Awesome. Very good. Hey, and going back to the audiobooks real quick, I just wanted to ask, I know that you've narrated some of your own audiobooks. Do you have any advice for other pharmacist authors who want to narrate their own audiobooks?
Hire someone to do it. It's so much work. I,
If it's the truth, let's hear it.
it's absolutely brutal to narrate your own book, and the only reason I do it is because it's just when it comes to finding a narrator that can pronounce medication names and medical terms and things like that, it's actually very difficult. So I honestly, if you're having your first book put out there, it's better to have someone do it. And that's what I did. I mean, a number of the first books I wrote were, I had somebody else do it. And the only reason I do them is because when it's a book that's 3 hours or less, I might do it just because I can kind of handle that. But man, if it's a 6 or 7 hour project, I want nothing to do with it. It's just so much
do,
freaking work.
do you go to a studio? I'm just curious.
Oh no, I got my little I found a place where there's no noise, no outside noise, and then I just have somebody um, uh, edit it for X number of dollars, and it's but no, there's no studio, and it's just a snowball mic, $30 snowball mic, and GarageBand. So, and my podcast, I don't really edit much. Yeah, so it's very relatively inexpensive for me to do all the audio stuff myself. But if I have a book and I put it together and I want a really good job done, I don't want to read it myself. I'm not an actor, so you really want an actor to do justice to the words that you've written.
Good advice. Thanks for sharing, Tony. Well, as we start to wrap this up, is there anything else you'd like to share about the Pharmacist Residency and Career Series, or being an author, or being an audiobook narrator? The floor is yours, sir.
I think that there are a lot of. I was just listening to a podcast, of course, and somebody explained pharmacy to me in a way that was really impactful. He was a Canadian, and he's like, physicians are kind of like the United States, very huge, get all the attention, and pharmacists are kind of like Canada. We're very important, but people don't really notice us as much anymore, or don't really notice us as much. And I feel like when you create an audiobook and you write a book, you're helping kind of turn that around where now you're the person people go to. And I think that because there's not a ton of writing in pharmacy school, there's not a ton of public speaking. There's a little bit, but not a ton. That at first it's pretty scary, but it honestly 20% of the books will be 80% of your sales. So you really want to get to 5 books, and one of them is going to be a hit. So instead of thinking of it as, okay, I'm going to be an author, I tried it, it didn't work, you really have to get to number 5 before you're going to get that one that's going to really kind of resonate with people. Maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't. But the author of Eat, Pray, Love said the same thing. She wrote 7 books, and really one of her books is the one that everybody knows her for, and it wasn't her first. So, give it a shot. Trying to be an author, start with 10,000 words, which is an hour-long book, and go from there, because I want to hear from you. And there's just not a lot of pharmacist written books out there, but there's enough pharmacists that we would listen. So go for it.
Excellent parting words. Thanks for the inspiration, Tony, and thanks for coming back to the Pharmacist Voice podcast. Take care.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thanks again to Tony Guerra for being my guest today. Now, if you're interested in writing a book, I hope that Tony has inspired you to use your voice too. Like Tony, maybe you have the solution to a problem and you can write a book that provides the solution to a specific audience. Next, I'll share a sample of Book 1 in the Pharmacist Residency and Career Series. It was narrated by Tony. Then we'll wrap up this episode. Enjoy.
Introduction. Motivated but ignorant. If this book is going to do you any good, I'm going to need to take you to a time and place you're not going to like. It's a quiet morning in the middle of March, and you refresh your screen to read the email. Rejection. You didn't match with a residency site. Not one. You can't believe it. Are you good enough to become a clinician? Let's move to another time and place of similar great pain. 2 years ago, I was the default parent coach for my daughter's soccer team. Since I have triplets, my tribe comprised 3/4 of the 4 versus 4 youth team. The sun beat down on them, there were no substitutes, and the other team hammered us with a 6-0 shutout in the last period. So emotionally distraught were they that I had to stop the game early. I was furious because I was careless. I showed up as a parent, but I didn't invest as a coach. My daughters all thought they were bad at soccer and shouldn't continue because they had such a bad game. Many residency applicants will believe incorrectly they are bad at pharmacy instead of what is really true, which is that they are inexperienced at applying for a residency position. I took full responsibility and decided that would never happen again. Never would I allow a team that I coached fall victim to my incompetence. I was motivated but ignorant of how much I could improve the team's results with a few key changes. In the 2 years since, teams I've coached have lost only a few games. Those we did lose, we can be proud of our effort. How did I turn the league's punching bag into a bastion of confidence? Did I homeschool them and make time for twice daily lessons in shooting, passing, and goalkeeping? No. I became a student of the game, and I improved 3 things. 1. Increased speed of play. When a ball goes out of bounds, my players now fly to get the throw in towards the goal before the defenders can get in position. That slight edge often opens up breakaway opportunities. 2. Tactics. When a throw-in goes in from out of bounds, it's a 50-50 ball no matter what you do. There's no point throwing it backwards to our defender who is open, putting the ball 10 feet closer to our goal, allowing their defenders to intercept it half the time. Instead, we immediately throw it at their goal, moving it 10 feet closer to a score with everyone facing an attack formation, hoping one of our forwards will take control of the 50-50 ball. 3. Right place, right time. I paired the 6 field players with a colored athletic wristband. The forwards wear white, midfielders pink, and defenders blue. Forwards are responsible for corner kicks, midfielders for throw-ins, and defenders for goal kicks. Each player knows where to be when the referee blows the whistle for a corner, throw-in, or goal kick. In applying for a residency, you don't realize your speed of play is not up to par until a professor rejects your recommendation request because she already has too many. When you spend weeks on your CV compared to hours on the letter of intent and recommendation, your tactics are off. The LOI and recommendation letters count much more than your CV and 4 years of school. When you try to talk with the residency director during the mob that is the residency showcase, you're not meeting in the right place and right time. Meaningful conversations happen at the evening, relaxing state and college gatherings later in the day. I don't want you shut out like my team was in that game. I want you to be a member of the team to beat. You have to increase your speed of play, study successful tactics, and put yourself in the right place at the right time. For a moment, close your eyes and feel the pain of that rejection email. Now, commit to never feeling that sting again.
Tony does a great job. Thanks so much for the sample, Tony, and thank you for listening to episode 225 of the Pharmacist Voice podcast. please visit thepharmacistvoice.com to read the show notes. In the show notes, you'll find links to the Pharmacist Residency and Career Series. That is an 8-book series. All 8 links are in the show notes. You'll also find links to the Pharmacy Residency podcast, Tony's online courses, and our other podcast interview from June of 2022. That's the Pharmacist Dad series featuring Tony Guerra. You'll also find Tony's social media links, my social media links, and more. If you know someone who would like to read the Pharmacist Residency and Career Series 8-book series or hear today's interview, please share this episode with them. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to or follow the Pharmacist's Voice podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Join me on Monday, June 26th for my interview with Dr. Christina Fontana. It's her birthday, and we'll be talking about her book, Moving Beyond the Counter, Elevating into Heart-Centered Healthcare Through Entrepreneurship. Thank you for listening today. I'll talk to you on Monday.